You're doing a good job.
Thank you. I'll try again. You gonna stay there? Welcome to the Marzocco Partner Summit.
Welcome
It
to the
is our pleasure to introduce a guy, Anthony Rudolf, as your keynote speaker.
You do all the talking.
So here's a guy who had a bitter rival down the street, a guy named Will Guidara, who ran another one of the world's best restaurants. And Anthony said, I think we're better as allies and as partners than as enemies. We keep pulling in opposite directions. What would happen if we pulled in the same direction? Could we actually change the world through hospitality? And they did it. They founded this thing called the Welcome Conference. And it's incredible. It's about bringing people together through hospitality.
I think that's what drives us, because anybody can walk around a restaurant in a fancy suit pretending to be the kind of person that serves somebody, right? But if you're not taking care of your wife, you're not taking care of your child, which he has, congratulations, as of a couple weeks ago, you're only doing it part-time. And there's something hypocritical about that, and Anthony's no hypocrite. He's the real deal.
First time I met Anthony was in the back of a party limo. We were both nominated for a James Beard Award.
Seriously?
I think we were both nominated
Did
for
you win one?
No, we were nominated for the same award.
Did he win it?
Yeah.
Damn him! Are you serious?
I know, so I'm in the back of a limo and I'm like, oh, who's this guy?
Well, that's right. You telling me that we were nominated for the same?
We were both
and
nominated
he
for
won.
James Beard Outstanding Service. And
He deserved it. I'm not saying we don't deserve it. I'm just saying I know he deserved it.
he does.
The same year?
It's
We
a
were
hard
nominated the
truth.
same year and he won?
Yeah.
I don't think I was there.
I mean, I can clap now.
I'd like to clap that now.
At the time it was.
I know, it's probably like,
I was like, oh, there's.
and the James Beard goes to, oh, no!
Anthony Rudolf.
Anthony Rudolf.
Statement.
Anthony Rudolf is the kind of guy you're happy to lose to.
Yes.
And so many people have.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Anthony Rudolf.
It's kind of an awkward finish after
that good?
that. Because
I really hope
I
his
feel
shirt's
like he
off
should
as
like
he's
come
walking
in.
out right
Yeah,
now.
he's like.
I really have no idea what to say about that, except you can't trust anything that the Canlis guys say. They are not to be trusted whatsoever. How's everybody doing? That's it? You guys didn't have coffee today? How's everybody doing? There we go. I wish I could see you, but I can't, so let's know that. So life is a really funny thing because you have a plan to do something, and then somebody comes along, punches you in the gut, and then changes that plan. So I'm at a bit of a loss right now because my world's just been changed. And I just got to give a hats off to Whitney for standing up here and bearing her soul and sharing that story. And when you talk about collaboration or you talk about community, and if there's anything, I'm like really charged and emotional by that. Thank you so much. If there's anything you take away from today, know that what that was the essence of collaboration, right? If you look at it on a scale of people building companies together and doing things like that, to just sharing is really the root of collaboration. It doesn't need to be, you need to go seek out a person and start a company together and change all of your business plans and go out and embark on the world as best friends and new colleagues. But really, just openly, bare your soul and share. And I just think, Whitney, can we get another round of applause? That was so beautiful. You know, a lot gets talked about with hospitality, but ultimately what it is vulnerability, right? That's the root of it, vulnerability, being willing to share. And often in, I can't speak specifically to the coffee world, but in the restaurant profession, vulnerability traditionally and historically is a weakness. Right? It's the bravado, the coming from a military, the brigade system that doesn't allow people to actually just open up and be human, which is crazy when you think about the end result, which is somebody ingesting our work, which is one of the most intimate things you can do, whether it be an espresso or a bowl of soup or a sandwich or something that you create. They trust you enough to put it into their body, which can't be said about a lot of industries except for maybe healthcare and then, beauty products. So it's a very intimate thing, and it just always boggles my mind that, well, it's something we need to change to make vulnerability more present. Okay, so the topic of my speech is from competition to collaboration. And so what does that really mean? Well, it's really short for a couple things. One, just letting go of your ego, losing all ego and just sharing. Two, making a difference for your profession. And three, changing the way that you design and build things. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to walk you through my design process and how I ultimately arrived at creating the Welcome Conference, and then also Journee, which is the logo up there. And I'm just going to get a show of hands. I got to block the lights. How many people have heard of Journee? Fantastic, like 3%. Awesome. And that's okay. We grow organically. So we are a community for restaurant professionals. And so when you look at this spectrum of collaboration, right, there's just sitting and having a coffee and sharing and talking, which is how it started with Will, and I'll get into that more. I'll give you the true story of what happened, not the fun, fluffy story. And then there's ultimately starting a business that's rooted in it. And I'm a bit of an extremist in everything that I do. So I went all in after leaving Chef Keller. I was director of operations for New York, so I ran Per Se and Bouchon Bakery, had a staff of 360-some people. Everything that you could possibly imagine as you grow a career in the restaurant world. And I realized a couple things. What really drove me on a daily basis was nurturing, mentoring, and helping the people that worked with and for me to achieve their dreams. And the consumer was just an end result. And so I thought, well, what if I went all in on this? What would that look like? And that's Journee. And so just a quick spiel on that before I get into my design process is I literally went all in. I took a 3,000 square foot loft space in the Flatiron District of New York, 21st Street and 5th Avenue. And I built a 1,000 square foot classroom, a 1,000 square foot library and conference room, and then my team's offices are there. And we are a membership community for restaurant professionals that includes everybody in the restaurant industry, from owner-operator to porters to baristas. And we program about 4 to 5 events per week currently, leveraging my network and the network within New York City of the best to come in and share their skills, their perspectives, their thoughts, their knowledge from accounting, human resources, legal, wine, coffee. If it happens in a restaurant, we teach it, except for serving and cooking, right? You're going to get that working 60 to 70 hours a week. And then we're going to be there for you when you're ready to make an aspirational leap in your career, whether it be a first-time manager, or you're going to open your first restaurant, or maybe go from 1 to 10. And so we don't entertain the consumers whatsoever. And so as I start with my design process, as I walk you through that, it's important to know that I start my design process with 3 simple words. Fuck the consumer. And I start with that because I need to be liberated because they're an almighty powerful force. There's 7 billion of them, which equals tons and tons of opportunity and tons of money. But in the restaurant industry, when you look at the role that they play, they're at the very end of the design and the creation process. They're the end result. And so when you build with them in mind first, you neglect so many things that come before it. And with the limited time that we have for the work that we do, you never actually get around to it. And so I found myself in building Journee saying, wow, this is going to be really hard. Okay, restaurant people are the worst people to build for. They don't have any money, and they don't have any time. And this was called out to me many times when I was raising capital of, why would you build for these people? They don't have any money, and they don't have any time. This sounds like an awful idea. And I said, but nobody's building for them, which makes it sound like an amazing opportunity. We'll find out if we can strike the time and price right. And so I kept having this pressure and this pressure and this pressure. Well, you're going to have these amazing sommeliers coming in and teaching. Why can't you just sell a seat to a consumer for $100? They'll pay for it. And they'll come in and you'll have a new revenue stream. I said, because it's not the same. They're not going to ask the same questions. They're going to be asking questions about, what type of wine should I throw with my dinner party? Which does absolutely nothing for the $12 an hour employee who's hoping to open a restaurant one day. And so I found myself in this pull, and I remember having a conversation with an employee who really was pushing granted her job was growth and strategy, to allow consumers in the door. And I got really angry, and I said, you know what? Fuck the consumer. I don't want him here. And I remember getting really animated, and I want you to know that when I say it, I actually say it with love and compassion and empathy, truly do, for their experience. I just think building for them first doesn't provide them the best experience. So let me walk you through my design process. It's really simple. So first, I design for myself. That comes first, right? That's the first step. How many people here have been on an airplane? Yeah, awesome. Anybody not been on an airplane? Okay, good. What's the rule when air cabin pressure drops and the gas and the oxygen masks fall down? Put your own on first, and then? So if that's the rule when shit hits the fan, why isn't that the rule everywhere else in life? Right? If you wake up and you don't take care of yourself first, it's okay to do it when you're like descending at a rapid rate and there's no air pressure. That's what you should do. But then in every other time, you should be selfless, or you should be, looking out for other people. But how can you do that if your gas tank is depleting? So as they mentioned in the video, my wife and I just had a baby girl. She's 7 weeks old yesterday, and I'm really grateful for the full night of sleep I got last night, my first in 7 weeks. So thank you, Whitney and Marzocco, for helping me with that. But I remember getting that piece of advice for parenting. It was from one of my investors, and I said, I really admire the way you raise your kids. What do I need to know? And he said, take care of yourself first. If you do that, your kid will thrive. If you focus on them, you're going to be depleted, and then you're going to get in this endless loop of being drained, trying to find your own self in this place while focusing so much on the kid. So that's the first part of my design process. Let me tell you how that works. How many people know or have a mission statement for their company? Great. How many people have a personal mission statement for themselves? Awesome. What a great room. That was about 20%. Not bad. That's a lot more than I usually get. So the first thing I think you should do, if you take anything from this, is go write a personal mission statement. Really figure out what you give a shit about. Right? We do this for companies. We're about to embark on a mission, and one of the first steps of a business plan is, what is your mission? Why does this company exist? But we don't often get taught along our life to write one for ourselves. What do you care about? What are your values? Why do you exist, and what is your place on earth? Right? And once you actually write that and really know what it is and can feel it every single day, then you can build from it. And a lot of times people build companies because there's great market opportunity, but they actually don't love it. So what is that going to turn into 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, if it makes it that long? So first thing is build for yourself. Know your mission statement and wake up every day and be reminded by it, and have that be the marker into which you make decisions from. I'm going to share you mine. My mission statement is, I seek to exist to help others along the paths to living their dreams. That's what turns me on every single day. And so as I was thinking about leaving Chef Keller and leaving, and I said, you know what am I going to do? And the obvious thing would be to open a restaurant. But it's not the best example of my mission statement, right? Because in life, for me, I want to have maximum impact with minimal effort. How can I get the most? By doing the least. Right? And that's just efficiency, right? Not to say that I'm lazy or I don't want to work, but how can I get the maximum with the minimal effort? Because then I can expand upon that. And so I thought, what would a company look like if I eliminated the consumer? Because there's just very few people whose dream or mission in life is to go around and eat at every single restaurant, or to eat at the same restaurant over and over again. So the consumer actually didn't fit within my life's mission. And so that birthed Journee, and then also birthed the Welcome Conference, which Will and I built together. The second part of my design process is, once I really nail that for myself, is build for my team. And then focus on them and build for them. What are their dreams? When I'm hiring, the most important thing to me, above skill and experience, is what do they believe in? Does their life's work, and everybody on my team has to write a personal mission statement, does that align with my values, and does that align with the values of the company? If it does, no brainer, I'm going to hire that person. Right? If it doesn't, I don't care what their skill and experience is, they're not joining the team. I know it doesn't work. 3 months down the road, we're going to butt heads on what the values of the company are and the mission is. I'm going to get frustrated, and then they're going to be gone. So I'm not going to go through that pain over and over and over again. So the first is to align with the mission on the team. And when you think about it, it really shifts the perspective of who you're working with. Right? It makes it from employees to followers. And what it does for them is pushes. Right? If you look at success or drive, I know the person who believes in what I believe is going to go above and beyond to find the things that they don't know, to seek out the answers, to ask 5 more questions when an employee or someone who doesn't believe what I believe might stop. So it's critical for me, and right now I have a team of 8. We've been open for 8 months, and confidently all of them believe what I believe, and it is the most amazing experience to come into every day with 8 followers, not having to worry about coaching them along their life's path. So I build for my team second. And that includes figuring out what they see differently than I, and then helping them achieve that. Not just having them follow my strict plan, but allowing new exposures to come in and saying, okay, let's go down this path and find out what it's like. Okay, thirdly, I build for the profession. I haven't even touched a consumer yet, right, in this design process. Building for the profession really comes down to raising the standards of the industry and your craft. Because if you do that, and you can lift the standards of the profession, you now have a new playing field, a new common denominator to build upon. Right? Because you're going to find cohorts in it. You're going to find collaborators. You're going to find people who believe the same things that you believe, and they're going to help you do it. I'll give you an example of that. And this came from Will and I's relationship. Actually, why don't we rewind, and why don't I tell you the real story about Will and I. Will and I hated each other. It was not like we were just ran 2 restaurants, and they were, we hated each other. Granted, we knew absolutely nothing about each other, but we hated each other. We'd see each other at cocktail parties and just ignore each other. And this was fueled primarily by all of the chatter that happens around, restaurants of this caliber, which at the time was eGullet was the big one, was the big food blog. And it was just crazy that there were diehard Per Se diners and diehard 11 Madison Park diners that would battle it out over who had the best hospitality and who had the best canapes and the best dessert service. And these would just get vicious on here, and which is just a strange thing to be a part of for your work, to have it play out in that way. But it fueled this intense competition, an unnecessary tense competition between Will and I. Well, that all came to a head in 2009. I was a general manager of Per Se, he of 11 Madison Park, and every year Relais and Chateau, which is a national congress accreditation of a traveler's guide, holds a congress, and so we got to go to Biarritz, France, and probably because we're both from New York, we found ourselves seated next to each other. And the majority of other people are from all over the world, and not a lot of people speak English, so we were forced to talk to each other. And I really hated him. I hated the way that his presence made me feel because he's really an intense hospitality guy. I hated his tie. His restaurant had just received 4 stars. I hated that because that was my one leg up. Go ahead, chatter all about Will. He's only got 3 stars and I've got 4. And, it was this whole thing, and we hit it off, and we probably stayed up till 6, 7 o'clock in the morning just talking and shooting the shit. And what we realized was that we had a lot in common, far more than we didn't. And so we let go of our egos, we let go of this false sense of hatred or competition that came from the world, and decided to carry what happened in Biarritz back to New York. And so we'd start meeting regularly, and we'd get some pastries and some coffee and just sit and talk about struggles and challenges and what we believed. And there's, one small example of what came from this was the removal of the maitre d' stand at both Per Se and 11 Madison Park, right? When you go into a restaurant, the first thing you encounter is this maitre d' stand, which is the craziest thing for hospitality because all it's telling you is stop. We don't really know if you're welcomed yet, so just stop there. Most of the time, the person's got their head down, looking at some computer screen, right? And then there's this wall and barrier before you. And we said, what would a restaurant look like if we got rid of it? Because a lot of restaurants of this caliber talk about welcoming you into their home. You don't walk into someone's house and there's like a podium there and they say, well, hello, how are you? Welcome. Please. I don't really know if you belong here yet, but, come in. And so we both did it. We both got rid of the maitre d' stand. He moved his around the corner. I pushed mine up against the wall, and we forced our hostess team to actually just stand and be present with somebody and address them, and then all you can do is actually let them in because it's free-flowing energy. And so that was one small example of how we just sat and talked and figured things out. And this meeting grew, and we started inviting other general managers in from four-star restaurants in New York City. And that grew from 5 of us meeting to, ultimately we got up to 40. And then Will and I said, well, what if we could get 400 in a room for a day to share perspectives, not really control what happens, but just set the stage to have people connect, be inspired, and share. And that born the Welcome Conference. Our first year was 2014. But the funny thing about learning is that it just doesn't happen overnight. So I'll share one other story with you. So Will and I, 2009, Biarritz. Fast forward to 2011, my next big learning lesson in how important it was to build for your profession first and to raise the standards of the industry and who your community is, came from a review of a new menu that they were rolling out with an ode to New York. When I say they, 11 Madison Park. So 11 Madison Park came out with a new menu in 2011 that was all New York. They had pretzels and nuts for nuts, and it was all things that were essential to New York, along with all of their plates were made by a guy in Brooklyn. All of their produce came from the New York market. Everything was very highly concentrated in New York. And Pete Wells, who was not the food critic of the time, but wrote a food op-ed piece in the New York Times, destroyed it. Decimated it. Called them juvenile. It's one of the hardest to read pieces about a restaurant of this caliber, I think, aside from the last Per Se review, which is personally the hardest thing that I've ever had to read. And I remember reading it on the subway. And you know what came back? The Anthony of 2008. Right? I started taking a little joy in it. Found a lot of pleasure in oh yeah, he's really getting it. Yeah, we're not getting it, he's getting it, this is awesome. And I was reading it, and then I got even deeper into it, and I got into the worst part of it, which is below the actual article in the comment section, right? And I got engaged in that snark and sarcasm and just whoever those people are. I got in there with them, and I started aligning with them. And I remember reading comments like, this is why I'll never go to a place like this. And I said, why are you commenting? You've never even been there. How can you comment on the experience if you actually haven't been there? And then I started to go down the down cycle of feeling really guilty about it, about what I was experiencing. And so I called Will immediately, and I said, hey man, I'm really, really sorry about this article. I'm really sorry that you and the team have to experience and read this. You guys must be really hurting. But I've got a confession for you. I just read it, and I took a lot of joy in it. And I'm really sorry about that. Because what I realized in it was, I'm not Pete Wells. He's not my peer. I really don't have much in common with him. He's a journalist. I don't like writing. And I'm certainly not the commenters. I'm one of the doers. And I'm one of you, Will. And I'm really sorry that I found myself in this vortex, aligning with him and aligning with the commenters. And I'm going to make you a promise I will never do that again. And then I made a promise to myself to never read the comment section of anything. And I haven't. So much so, if I read one comment, I have to do 25 push-ups. Because I know if I would start reading one comment, you're going to end up at 10, and there's no way I'm doing 250 push-ups. And from that came this idea of, okay, if we look at just building for the profession, whether it be removing the maitre d' stand, or simply just aligning and saying, what could our profession look like if we raise the standards? If we took the lowest common denominator together and bumped it up, what does the new potential become? So that's the third stage of designing my design process. So design for yourself first, build for your team, and then design for your profession. Okay, now's where the consumer comes in, right? Because you've taken care of everything up until this point before they actually come in and transact or be a part of the experience. And earlier, I know it's strong language, right? Fuck the consumer, but it really is more like fun and supporting and compassionate towards them rather than like, like, fuck you, pay me. It's more like, no, like, come on, like, you're going to have a great time. I'm just going to ignore you for a little while, and then you're going to have a great time. Because I truly believe that active participation from an experiential side is crucial to a guest having a great time. Right? If you follow the food scene or the restaurant scene over the last 5 years, there's been a trend in the artistic chef that doesn't allow anything, any choice, any decision to happen. In fact, you get a litany of you can't do this in either an email or a confirmation page before you even come in. Right? No substitutions. I don't care if you don't eat pork, you can't come. If you have allergies, go somewhere else. All of these things, which is more of a spectator sport, right? Which is fine when you go and watch a play, but when you're going to put something in your body, you can't just be a spectator and allow someone to take fully control of that. So what I believe is active participation, which really does allow the guest in. It allows them to have some say. They just don't get a say in everything I design up until that point. So what they become is really the first feedback loop as to, is everything that I'm building and that I believe in, are there enough people out there? And I'm going to read a quote from one of the greatest builders of our time, Steve Jobs. He says, it's not about pop culture, and it's not about fooling people, and it's not about convincing people that they want something they don't. We figure out what we want. And I think we're pretty good at having the right discipline to think through whether a lot of other people are going to want it too. And so you see, it's that discipline that they talk about in terms of really understanding, does the world want this? Do I want it? Do the people that work for me want it? Do my peers want it? I think if you can nail those three, it's a really good shot that the consumer is going to want it, because they're not putting nearly enough thought into what they want as these first three groups are. And so we do let them in, and we listen to their feedback loop, and we adjust and adapt, or we say, actually, your vision of the world isn't my vision of the world, and then I have a decision to make. What am I going to lose in this process if I continue to keep doing what I'm doing? But when you look at building for the consumer first, what happens? This is when we talk about trends, and we talk about, what do millennials want, I guess is the big topic of every single person in marketing. And it leads to things like kale salads, right? How did the kale salad start? Somebody loved kale. They loved it. And so what did they do? They said, I want to eat this. And so they put it on their menu. They didn't think that like 3 million people are going to want to eat kale salads every day. They just said, I really love kale, and I want to make a kale salad, and I want to get excited about it, and I want to put it out there. And then somebody ended up loving it. And then somebody said, gosh, we should really be in the kale salad business for no reason. And then kale salad takes over. And then cronuts take over. And then all of these things, and you have Dunkin' Donuts making cronuts. And all of these places, following these trends because they're building with the consumer first. And so evolution is dependent upon communities coming together, and I think in that particular design process. So it's funny, community and who we choose to partner with, right? And understanding for me that my peer group, whether it be my team or my profession, or my actual community, not necessarily the consumers, is critical. And community is actually driven by our DNA. Research has proven that we tend to be more genetically similar to our friends than to strangers. Furthermore, we tend to be genetically dissimilar to our spouses in one particular area, and that's our immune systems. And if you think about it, if my partner, my wife, is immune to something that I'm not, she'll never get that thing, and thus I'll never get it, or likely will not get it. And so even the communities we form and who we choose to are rooted in our DNA, and so often our brains try and work around that and form communities with other people. So that's the design process. I build for myself first. I then build for my team. I build for the profession, and then finally the consumer. And so if there's anything today, it's really about liberating yourself from when you go back and design and create and look to do something new. Are you really happy with it? Are you going to be happy with it in a year from now? Does it align with your personal mission statement? Do the people around you that are with you 60 plus hours a week, do they believe that this is great? And are they going to be happy with it? And are you contributing on some level to your profession? And hopefully raising the standards so that in 3 years from now it becomes ubiquitous and you're free to create new things. And then finally, is the consumer responding to it? And are they allowed the openness and the active participation to be a part of it? I focus a lot on evolution, and evolution of our industry, and evolution of our profession, because I do believe that if we work on all of those things, we will continue to get better and better and better. And God knows the restaurant industry needs to get better and better and better, especially when it comes down to the environment in which we work, right? And the lives that we get to lead. Because it's a funny thing, when you're a little kid, preschool, right? You're told to do what you love. Do what makes you happy. What do you dream about doing? And then slowly over time, the world just like punches that out of you and really cordons you off into do what's safe. Stability, family, security, and keeps going in. And I just think that's crazy. And restaurant people, I imagine coffee people are the same. We do choose to do what we love, regardless of the desired outcome, regardless of the financial gain or the security of it or the acceptance of it as a real job in society. That always boggled my mind. You know, I spent $120,000 on culinary education at the CIA, and I was a waiter at Jean-Georges, one of the best restaurants in the country, and often you ask, oh, so what do you do for your real job? Like, I'm actually doing it. This is it. This is what I do. And, you know, continuing to push that forward, you know, being rooted in loving what you do, being committed to following your dreams, and designing in that order will ultimately help evolve our professions. Thank you.
Anthony, thank you so much
Pleasure.
for being with us today. We have a little bit of time for some questions, if there are questions for Anthony. And while you're thinking about your super smart question, I will ask a question. So I want to know, when it was you and Will together.
Can I sit down here?
Sure. Who broke the ice first, and what was it that finally got one or the other of you to let your guard down?
It's a good question. Here's the thing from competition to collaboration. Competition never goes away, it just gets healthy. So I will always answer, I was the first to do it. Everything that 11 Madison Park has was stolen from me. I always had the best people. And I'm sure that at that table, I was the one that brought the most empathy and compassion. Whether or not that's true, you know, he's not here now to defend himself, so I'm just going to go ahead and take all the credit for it. But I really don't remember. You know, it probably started off like really casually, superficially, full of bullshit, and we just got forced into it. And, you know, when you get an hour, you really can't be that inauthentic for that long of a time. And so we just probably slowly let down our guards. But, you know, I did. I was the first.
Got it.
Hello.
Hi.
When we make changes in business, we're rolling along, everything works well. And sometimes we make changes that are risky. I know that you talked about making a lot of changes in something that was working for you. How long did you wait to see if something was working when you made a risky change before you threw in the towel and said, that's not working?
Good question. So first, you know, I often think about like how I respond to things. So before I answer the question, I like to use, I'm very specific, I like to be very choosy in the words that I use because they cause different emotional reactions in me. So there's change, and then there's evolution. How many people have just an instant negative response to change when they hear it? They either get anxious or hold up a little bit. Anybody? Depends on the change, right? And so, like for me, I get very anxious around change. Hearing that, like, what does that mean? Which, when you think about change being inevitable, all of your emotional reactions to change are also inevitable. So why wouldn't I design a better perspective on it? So I think of evolution. So I think it comes clearly with setting a plan, right? And then how are you defining working, right? Which could be a myriad of any things. Often in business, it's defined as money, right? And a lot of times it's a luxury to not have it be defined as money. But I think it also depends on how long-term you're looking and thinking, right? And so often we get shifted on a quarter basis of, is this working? I have one quarterly report before I can actually prove that it's working or not. When some things that really, they take a long time. I think in business and even in life, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success as an individual. And so things just work on a much larger horizon. I truly go, working to me is defined by, do I really want to do this? Right? Do I want to continue to do this? And if I do, I'm going to figure out how to go all in on making it happen, which means I may do other things to support that initiative that I may not want to do. Right? So when we talk about the consumer, and for Journee, look, I charge $365 a year for a membership to get access to this beautiful loft, and you get unlimited education, unlimited classes. Take as many as you want. And we're going to put them all online, and that's included for our members. So that's a really hard business model to make money at $1 a day. I understand that. And there may be a point in the next, 8 to 10 months, and I'm not forecasting, I'm just guessing, that I may have to compromise that and find some way to engage consumers to pay $100 for a class so I can get a cash flow in order to support the big mission, right? So where does it fall? Where does the current initiative fall on my priority scale? And then what am I willing to compromise to not do it? I mean, we do private events. We book private events for non-industry things because it's a cash injection that can allow me to continue to build for the $12 an hour employee, which is really what I care about. Is that helpful? An answer? Yeah.
So I think, drawing from that question, the previous question, something that we constantly discuss in the coffee industry specifically, and I don't really know, what your experience is as a consumer with our industry, but there's internal debate constantly about kind of bringing the customer along versus meeting those consumers kind of at their expectation of what our product should be. And I guess, if you could talk about one time where you were making a change and it was something that you were really passionate about, but customers sort of pushed back to some sort of product or concept in a restaurant. I think the New York menu at EMP is a good example where they had gotten so much press and 4 stars off their previous menu where you could mix and match just like the 4x4 grid, and then they made they took a big risk to change and go for top 10 on the Pellegrino list and push as far as they could. That they had to fight through that in a way. Do you have any experiences where?
Sure. I think the first understanding of that is ego, right? And who's right and who's wrong, and are you willing to say that there is no such thing as right? And a quote we used to use per se was, "My better is better than your better," which just creates this endless loop of argument of what are we talking about? And I think with that is what is the feedback that you're getting in terms of the pushback? And then, is it valid, or actually what are they really telling you? Because a lot of the times the feedback that you get, what they're saying is not what they're actually telling you. And the feedback, if you go to the 11 Madison Park review, was that it was young, right? And that it was really an immature experience because it was brand new. And so what they were telling Will, what Pete Wells was telling Will was, not that it was a bad concept, although it was stated that, is that it needs maturity, right? And that only comes with time and experience. And so Will said, this is what they're telling me. They're telling me we need to refine it, we need to mature, and we need to grow up. How do you do that? One day at a time. And so they continue to grow with that. But I think the idea of either bringing people along or meeting them where they're at, look, my belief on that is if they were invested in what you do or what I do, they'd be doing it, right? And so how many hours do you commit to coffee? And to answer your question, I'm highly caffeinated all the time about my involvement with your industry. How much time do you spend thinking about coffee? How much time do you think about the experience? How much time do you spend thinking about the machines and the tools and the people and the blends and everything that's happening? Far more than any consumer, because they also have a full-time job, right? And so I think naturally it's our job to bring them along, right? But it's not our job to think that we're right. And I also disagree with the idea that the customer is always right. I think that may have worked 110 years ago. I don't think that works today. And I think that's done more damage to the hospitality profession than it's helped. I mean, it certainly brought us along, but I think today, when we have so many people invested in either coffee or, the food and beverage world, the restaurant world, we're really committed people to making it better. We're not the days of yore, And so, I think it really comes down to right and wrong. And so I think it's your job to bring them along, but I think it's your job to humbly listen and figure out what are they actually saying. And then adapting from there. Again, you may say, you're just not my people. I respect what you're saying, but you may need to go somewhere else. This is my vision, and there's also, 50 people like you that are saying this is what they want. And it's finding that alignment. But I think it has more to do with ego and right versus wrong.
Hi.
Hi.
Quick question. Have you had any clever ways in which you've tried to communicate to the customer that it's your job and not theirs? Like through being on a menu or something subtle that kind of turns a light bulb on for them that, hey, this is what I prepared at this moment, and then they kind of trust that at that point? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Maybe clarify one thing. It's your job, meaning this is what you do, not what you do? Help me understand that one piece. Sorry.
Yeah, you talk about how it's your job, and the consumer has their job that they do, which is not within food or beverage.
Yeah.
And so ways in which you've communicated in a subtle way for them to sort of rest in what you're doing and be willing to try it rather than it being a kickback with something that you're doing?
Yeah. So, think about it in the context of if you focus just on, let's say, a steak being medium, not well done. There's 50 points or even 5 points of contact that happen up until that point. That's where you earn the right to say that you should really try this medium, right? This is potentially the best way, or what we believe to be the best way. It's not earned in, I like it this way versus it should be this way. It's earned in all the communication and dialogue up until that point. So even as simple as saying, instead of what can I get for you, how are you? Or even, you have to build trust, right? And that comes with any other dynamic between humans, is really figuring out who they are and what makes them tick, which is incredibly hard in a cafe. Right? Bouchon Bakery was 10 times harder to run than Per Se, because you have 3 minutes, not 3 hours per transaction, right? And so what are you doing up until that point to show that you actually care about them, so that when that moment comes of, I've got your back, not right versus wrong, but I've got you on this, and this is going to be an infinitely better experience. And if it's not, I'm going to fix it for you and make it the way that you want it. That's where the trust gets built up prior to that actual conversation of right versus wrong. Right? So when you're thinking about the design of the space and how you move through it and the way that the people greet, and are they making eye contact? Are there physical barriers, which is really hard in your profession because most of it's done behind a counter? Like, what are all of these emotional things that are happening between you and that person prior to the actual order being placed? That leads to openness. Cool?
Thank you. So in the coffee industry, there's so much collaboration going back to the farmers. So literally trying to right a wrong. So there's so much focus on direct trade, making sure everybody gets paid well, transportation's right, everything's good. Comes to the United States, and at times it's kind of a war zone between I do the best trade, I do this the best, I roast the best, I have the best green beans. What would you suggest for an industry that has changed the whole model of how the farmers' lives are going, yet there's still a little bit of tension between the companies in the US?
In best being like highest quality product?
I'd say highest company. You know, we're literally doing the best. And there's not much collaboration when you're not willing to work with others.
Yeah.
So there's all this energy around helping people, because you're helping the farmers and the people who are producing the coffee, the pickers. But when it comes over here, there's not much collaboration.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's so, if I could parallel it to the restaurant industry, I think it's a lot of like, we in particular spend so much time in everything that we source and procure, right? But we often don't put that same energy into our people, which is why it's not so great to work in restaurants, traditionally or historically. It's getting much better. I think we're in a curve of going from the mega big business to more and more small, influential businesses. And just naturally, your collaboration is going to have to happen in order to succeed over the next decade. But I think also you can't expect everybody to just want to talk and share. Right? That would just be completely unnatural. There's just different adoption cycles across everything. And so the point of that, I guess, is to first, if you take the design process, design for yourself first. How are you defining best? Is best most profitable? Right? Because that's a metric you can measure. Is best highest quality bean? Is best staff and hospitality? Best ambiance? How do you define best for yourself? And then how does your team define best? And once you get to this point, it really doesn't matter what measure anybody else gives you. So Per Se just got a really shitty review, 2 stars from the New York Times. They went from 4 stars to 2 stars in one review, which is like devastating and heartbreaking. And I went and spoke to the staff a couple weeks ago, and they're just devastated. And I said, look, if you have to wait 4 to 5 years for validation of your work from one person, you're not thinking about it the right way, right? So understanding where your validation metrics are coming from, primarily the most important is from yourself. So are you doing the best work that you possibly could? If you are, that's really all that matters, right? And then can you emotionally fight through all of the things that the competition, the noise, the validation, the so-and-so raising $300 million to expand across the country and you can't, and all these like things that happen in all of our businesses now. I think it all just reverts back to yourself and what does best actually mean for me. And to me, for me, that's enough. Right? I like the external validation. Certainly, I don't not like it, right? But you don't need it to truly define that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Anthony.